Some words carry a weight heavier than their letters. Piru is one such name, once a demon in Finnish forests, later a word for life among California's Chumash, now a battle cry echoing through Compton's streets. From myth to violence, Piru's journey is a chilling transformation. In the late 1960s, Los Angeles was a city of fractured dreams. In Compton, hope was scarce, and tension simmered. Led by Raymond Washington and Stanley Tookie Williams, the Crips rose, spreading fear and forcing others to choose: join, be victimized, or fight back. On Piru Street, a new alliance formed, the Bloods, led by Sylvester Scott, forging an identity in Defiance. Before the legend, there was the boy. Sylvester Scott grew up on Piru Street, Compton. Just a scrawny kid, more interested in football than violence. But the streets were changing, forging him into something new. The innocence faded and a survivor emerged. The transformation was beginning. The Crips moved through neighborhoods with invincibility, their blue rags symbols of authority. But when they targeted Sylvester Scott and Vincent Owens, they met unexpected resistance. What began as intimidation erupted into a desperate fight. Scott and Owens stood their ground, sparking a movement. That day, the Piru Street Boys were born, and a new brotherhood claimed its place. Outnumbered by the Crips, the Piru Street Boys knew survival meant unity. Led by Puddin, they reached out to other gangs, forging an alliance sealed by the color red, a symbol of blood and defiance. The Bloods were born, forever changing the streets of Los Angeles. The Bloods, outnumbered and desperate, turned to OG Puddin, a man whose legend was built not on brawls, but on cold, precise gunplay. Puddin's hunting skills, learned from his father, made him a predator on Compton's streets. His aim legendary and his presence terrifying. He led by example, striking deep into enemy territory, instilling fear that kept Crips locked inside their homes. Under his ruthless philosophy, the Piru Street Boys became hunters, not just survivors. The war escalated from fists to gunfire, culminating in a brutal attack that left one Crip dead and sent a bloody message: the Pirates would not be intimidated. The real war for Compton had begun. After the infamous shooting, OG Puddin became the Crips' most wanted man, his name whispered in fear. He struck where it hurt most, the Red House, a Crip stronghold, turning their sanctuary into a war zone. Puddin's attacks were psychological warfare, proving nowhere was safe. His boldest move ambushing Crip co-founder Tookie Williams, shooting him and shattering the myth of Crip invincibility. The story spread. Puddin was now a specter, a legend, untouchable and deadly. The balance of power in Compton was forever changed. In 1975, the murder of Tam Owens, Puddin's closest ally, unleashed a wave of vengeance. Puddin's campaign was relentless. Crips were left wounded, marked as warnings. His green '69 Riviera became a symbol of terror. At its sight, Crips scattered in panic. Puddin operated alone, his precision and unpredictability fueling his myth. He was no longer just a gangster. He was Compton's executioner, feared by all. The city belonged to the hunter in the Green Riviera. Puddin's terror went beyond violence. It was psychological warfare. In one infamous incident, he forced Crips to play Russian roulette, each click of the empty chamber a lesson in fear. Some believed he never loaded the gun, making the ordeal pure psychological torture. The legend grew. Puddin was a killer who toyed with fate itself. With over 20 Crips dead, he was both hunted and untouchable. How do you fight a man who controls fear? As the Black Panthers tried to unite Compton's gangs, the police saw a threat they couldn't control. Desperate, the Compton PD struck a secret deal with OG Puddin. Keep the Panthers out, and his drug trade would be ignored. Puddin crushed Panther influence with ruthless efficiency, ensuring the revolution never reached Compton. The police got peace. Puddin got power and profit. The city's fate was sealed by a pact between law and outlaw. In Compton, survival meant making deals with the devil. OG Puddin returned from prison, hardened and changed, to a world shaped by gangster rap and danger. His fiery romance with Jewel, the First Lady of Death Row, spiraled into jealousy and violence. In a desperate struggle, a gun went off, leaving Puddin wounded, a victim of the very violence he once wielded. A single gunshot marked the beginning of OG Puddin's decline. Once untouchable, he became mortal, haunted by pain, fading power, and betrayal. His empire crumbled, and in 2006, he died from the wound that changed everything. The street legend's fall ended an era, his legacy forever staining the streets of Los Angeles. All kings, eventually, must fall. The deal with the Compton PD kept the Panthers out, but opened the floodgates to something worse: crack cocaine. The Piru became chief distributors, transforming neighborhoods into battlegrounds. Profits soared, violence escalated, and loyalty faded. Everyone wanted a piece. The cocaine flood changed everything, making the war about millions, not just survival. The Bloods Alliance was never truly united, just a loose federation of sets, held together by Red and a common enemy. By the late 90s, the fiercest feud wasn't with the Crips, but between Mob Piru and Fruit Town Piru, brothers turned bitter rivals. The streets ran red with Piru blood as unity gave way to a self-destructive war within. But in the world of the streets, there is no greater sin than betrayal. The one label that can never be washed away is that of a snitch. OG Puddin, once a feared figure, testified against corrupt cops. On the streets, it didn't matter why. He had talked to the feds. His enemies now had a new weapon. He was a snitch. Sylvester Scott emerged from prison in the early 90s, no longer the untouchable legend. The gang world he'd shaped had changed, and whispers of his cooperation with the law haunted him. Once a feared ghost in a Green Riviera, he was now a relic. His aura fading, his battles turning inward, setting the stage for a tragic final act. Jewel, the First Lady of Death Row, and Puddin's worlds collided in a passionate, high-stakes romance. But as Jewel's star rose, Puddin's jealousy and violence turned their love toxic. The home became a battleground, the romance a cage, until a final, violent confrontation changed everything. The boiling point was reached. In a desperate struggle, Jewel fought OG Puddin for his gun. The weapon fired. Puddin was struck in the chest by his own bullet. The prophecy was fulfilled. Those who live by the gun die by it. The bullet became a permanent reminder, his own violence finally coming home. The gunshot wound to the chest was the beginning of the end for Sylvester Scott. It was not the swift, violent death one might have expected for a man of his history, but a slow, agonizing decay. He survived the initial trauma, but the bullet and the damage it caused remained with him, a relentless internal enemy. His health began a steady decline, a gradual erosion of the formidable strength that had once been his trademark. The man who had seemed like an unstoppable force of nature was now engaged in a losing battle against his own body. The chronic pain and cascading health complications became his new reality, a quiet and personal form of torture. His presence on the streets, already diminished by his prison time and the Snitch Jacket, faded almost completely. He was now a shadow of his former self, a ghost haunted not by his victims, but by his own failing health. The legend of OG Puddin persisted in stories and whispers, but the man himself was largely absent from the world he had helped create. The day-to-day struggles of his declining health replaced the strategic battles of the gang war. The final chapter of his life was not one of power and glory, but of pain and suffering, a quiet, protracted epilogue to a life lived at maximum volume. On May 12, 2006, nearly a decade after the fateful shooting, Sylvester Scott's body finally gave out. He died at the age of 51 from health complications that stemmed directly from that old gunshot wound. In a final, fittingly ironic twist, the Los Angeles County coroner officially classified his death as a homicide. The bullet fired by Jewel years earlier had finally claimed his life, making it a murder with a decade-long delay. The street warrior's end came not in a hail of gunfire, but in the sterile quiet of medical failure, a delayed consequence of a violent act born from a toxic relationship. The death of O.G. Puddin closed a foundational chapter in the history of Los Angeles gangs. He was the blueprint, the architect of the Piru identity. His personal journey from a scrawny, intelligent kid to a feared killer, and finally to a broken, ailing man, encapsulates the entire tragic arc of the life. He was a product of his violent environment, and in turn, he made that environment infinitely more violent. His legacy is one of blood and fear, a cautionary tale written on the streets of Compton. The king had fallen, not to a rival, but to the slow, inescapable poison of the very life he had perfected. Sylvester O.G. Puddin Scott's ghost still haunts Compton, a legend whispered in the shadows, a dark mirror of a city that promised dreams but delivered nightmares. His name became synonymous with terror, his story a blueprint for street power and a cycle of violence that outlived him. In the end, his ghost reminds us, the violence you create will always, eventually, come back for you. The Pirates and the Bloods, the alliance forged in desperation by O.G. Puddin and others, grew far beyond their creator's vision. They transformed from a small defensive coalition into a sprawling nationwide network of sets. Their red flags fly in cities across America and even overseas, a testament to the powerful and destructive appeal of their brand. The name Piru itself, once just the name of a quiet Compton street, is now a global signifier of gang affiliation. What began as a fight for survival on one block became a self-perpetuating culture of violence, a crimson stain that has spread across the map, often disconnected from its original purpose of protection. The war with the Crips, the conflict that gave birth to the Bloods, became the defining feature of Los Angeles for decades. It created a seemingly endless cycle of retaliatory violence that consumed thousands of lives, turning entire neighborhoods into war zones. The red versus blue narrative became deeply embedded in popular culture through music, movies, and media, often glorifying the conflict while ignoring its devastating human cost. The rivalry became bigger than the men who started it, taking on a life of its own. A relentless engine of death fueled by generation after generation of young soldiers ready to die for a color. The streets Puddin fought to control are still battlegrounds today. The legacy of the Bloods is a complex and dark tapestry. For some, it remains a source of identity, brotherhood, and protection in a world that offers them little else. It is a family for the abandoned, a tribe for the disenfranchised. But for countless others, it is a machine of destruction. It has torn families apart, destroyed communities, and perpetuated a cycle of trauma and incarceration. The drug trade, which Puddin embraced as a tool for empowerment, became a plague that hollowed out the very neighborhoods the gangs claimed to represent, trading short-term profit for long-term devastation and addiction. The shadow of O.G. Puddin and the pirates he founded looms large over the history of American street gangs. His story is a grim chapter in the tale of a city at war with itself. It is a chronicle of how fear, neglect, and brutality can forge an identity, create an army, and leave behind a legacy of pain that echoes for decades. The crimson stain on the streets of Los Angeles is a permanent reminder of the boys from Piru Street, who drew a line in the sand and, in defending it, unleashed a tide of blood that is yet to recede. The myth of Piru, born in fire, continues to burn.